So, among one of the few controversies that is coming up with the House of the Dragon is, of course, the casting of Corlys and the British actor chosen for it, and it's already dividing people. Now, we're going to hear Dragon Demands. This is only a very short excerpt from a very long, over hour plus video where he goes through this, that the casting is not illogical. It doesn't really destroy anything in the lore. It's fine, it works with the books, etc., etc. And I'm with him most of the way, but I think he's kind of missing the point of what the controversy is. I agree with him, some people are definitely going to seize on this. That's fine. But I kind of disagree with the logic of how he's responding to this in sort of in two ways, and we're going to hear him speak, presenting his own position and sort of his own thoughts about why it's necessary to clarify Corlys or even explain this at all.
Even in the books, Summer Islanders are like at the port of Driftmark all the time. So I would be upset if this was like the Mormonts on Bear Island. They made some convoluted explanation of why a Summer Islander would marry someone there when they don't really visit there. There's Summer Islanders and stuff in Driftmark and Bravos all the time because of sea trade. That these are well, polyglot means language, but a cosmopolitan, polyglot crossroads of trade region. So, and that didn't seem very unusual to me. And on top of that, the Valyrians are from the old Valyrian Empire. They're from the Free Cities. At this point in time, in House of the Dragon, it's only 200 years after the Doom of Valyria. So, factoring in that there's a lot of sea trade back and forth across the Narrow Sea, they're still part of that same culture zone that's racially mixed. So the point I was making was, there's basically three things. Strict adherence to the books, changes that break the rules of the storyverse, and minor changes that fit within the rules of the storyverse. And this is the last one, like making Salador San black. Well, he's from the Free Cities. You can do that, as opposed to if he was a Mormont or something very isolated, or a wildling up in the mountains. And pretty much that's the reaction I've seen from most book fans, because book fans, people who will sit down to read a book, are actually pretty attentive to facts. When you can point out with citations, they describe Pentos as like this. Well, they're actually from the Free Cities, and most importantly, I thought the Valyrians were strict about blood purity. One sentence explanation. Well, yeah, the top tier guys, but the lower ranking guys weren't as obsessed with that. The Dragon Lords on top, but they weren't Dragon Lords. They're the equivalent of merchants from Pentos or something. So I don't have a problem with race-swapping characters who could be black. It doesn't really violate the rules of the storyverse. My comparison is in the new Batman movie, they're making Jim Gordon black. Why wouldn't he be? I mean, it's a modern era where people can be anything. If they made up some really convoluted explanation for, like, why, this Tully had a Summer Islander merchant who came to the middle of the continent to intermarry with someone, that gets contrived at a certain point, and you're really not telling us.
Alright, so the basic gist, I think, is fine. He's done a lot of good research on this, and the way people think that Targaryens work, there's sort of a lot of misconceptions. Essentially, this is a different house, and so the fact that this house might have, people we don't stereotypically think of as Targaryen, right? We have this image of the Targaryens, purple eyes, and so on and so forth. That's not this. Therefore, they've got it wrong, and the answer is no. It depends on the house, it depends on the context. So the positive kind of part of the argument I think was fine. But he's also got this weird kind of negative logic that, well, we shouldn't be too upset at this because I think we can trust the producers and the writers because they're not Benioff and Weiss. And again, I don't think he's a hater, I'm not a hater. We're just analyzing what Benioff and Weiss did wrong. And I think there's a certain merit in doing that, but I don't buy that part of the logic. So my thing here is on two levels. One, I don't think it's necessarily true we should trust House of the Dragon producers or writers just because they're not Benioff and Weiss. That's not sufficient to say, well, we should trust their casting decisions because they're not Benioff and Weiss. That does not make any sense whatsoever. He's correct that this isn't really a real controversy if you know the books. That's fine. And really, this is just a casual viewer. And having done stuff on Star Wars, I think he's actually being kind of naive in that some people have an issue with Corlys. I think we have to be honest. It probably is clickbait because, listen, they see what happens with Star Wars. That people just make up controversies. They take an extreme stance. They get people riled up. They get people just, you want to hate something, whether it's Rian Johnson or Daisy Ridley. And it's fine to hate these people as long as you have good reasons. That's fine. You can put out hate videos, but do you have good research? But they just put out really, really stupid videos, but it gets hundreds of thousands of views, and that translates into a lot of money. So I think he's being a little naive. I'm sure some YouTubers are just deceiving people, and that is what it is. So I myself, I have, I guess, a more cynical approach. I just don't think they care about the books. And so I think his assumption that they're being more mature or serious is not shown. And he provides me no evidence to trust the producers or writers. He's just making a big, big assumption that they're better than Benioff and Weiss. I don't see that. So I disagree with him there. I also disagree with him, like, his whole framework. I think it's fine that he's discussing what he's discussing. He's going from within the books to outside. I try to look at both. I look at the production history and the context and the books, as well as the production, and as well as the adaptation process, which is what we're going through. I think, to me, this feels like Hollywood casting. That this is the British industry just basically favoring their own, because they could have chosen a lot of different actors. Why are they choosing a British actor? Why are they going so hard with UK casting? I think this is just a very corrupt monopoly. Maybe they're going to get talented people, maybe they're going to get good people, but one place I would defend Benioff and Weiss is that their casting wasn't always the best, but they did get a lot of great people because they did not have these constrictions. Because back then, nobody knew about Game of Thrones. Nobody wanted to be on Game of Thrones, so they had to get people who they thought would be interested in playing these roles, whoever they were. Just to name one case, they tried to get Brian Cox, and he just asked for too much money, and they couldn't afford that, so he said no, and he walked away. So I think people have to be at least a little cautious in sort of projecting the future back to the past. People back then really didn't know Game of Thrones was going to make that much money or going to be a big cultural phenomenon. So the casting, I think, was a little bit better because people who wanted to be on the show wanted to be on the show. People who didn't want to be on the show left the show because they just didn't think there was going to be a lot of money involved. And that's fine. But this is now a different situation. I think it's just become a very much more corrupt process. Now, I'm not totally opposed to HBO. After all, they've done the Snyder Cut. I'm a big supporter of Zack Snyder. I think we can be critical of him. I'm not an uncritical fan. I do like a lot of his stuff, but a lot of his stuff I think you can freely criticize. But HBO, to me, still is very, very mixed in how they're doing business. I think this is just more mixed nonsense. If people want to see the positive side, that they're trying to do something in terms of progressive values, that's fine. I have no problem with that interpretation. But I'm not also totally against some people who are like, this feels very cynical and stupid. I agree. There's something stupid and cynical about the whole thing, but I don't think the sea snake is the worst thing. I think he's only, unfortunately, one of many things that you can pick on and saying this, they're just not being serious about the books. They don't really care about the books. So I think it's a symptom, but it's not a big symptom. But I agree with Dragon Demands that, yes, ultimately it works with the lore. There's nothing wrong with the lore. But I think in a way he's dodging the more interesting issue here, which is, well, what do we think they're up to? And he assumes that they have good motives. I think the best we can say at this point is it's a big question mark, and just assuming this is a good choice or the right choice is very presumptive. So, and that's where I'm going to stand. But it's a very good video. We're going to go over more of it. But I do think he's being perhaps a little too naive at both ends. But that's my take on it. All right, there's been an analysis of how Dragon Demands is confronting the casting controversy